Montana Territory, 1875. Sarah Mitchell's homestead stands alone against the vast prairie, her quiet world defined by solitude and the child growing beneath her heart. When a bullet-riddled stranger collapses on her porch one stormy night, she faces a choice that will forever alter her destiny. Despite the wanted posters bearing his face, she sees something in his eyes that speaks of innocence rather than guilt. As she tends his wounds and shelters him from a ruthless posse, an unexpected bond forms between two souls touched by loss and betrayal. But in a land where justice wears a tarnished badge, can Sarah trust her heart when it tells her this man's hands are cleaner than those hunting him? The tarnished silver pocket watch lay silent in Sarah Mitchell's palm, its hands forever frozen at 8:47. Morning light filtered through the cabin's east window, catching the delicate engravings that James had traced countless times while lost. In thought, 2 months had passed since pneumonia stole her husband, but Sarah still wound the watch each dawn, a ritual that kept him close despite the growing distance between life and memory. Setting aside the timepiece, she pressed one hand against the gentle swell of her belly, 4 months along now, and pushed herself up from the rough-hewn kitchen chair. The morning chores wouldn't wait, pregnant or not. James had taught her. Well in their 3 years together, insisting she learn every aspect of running the homestead. A Montana wife needs to be twice as capable as any man, he'd said, pride warming his voice as she mastered each new skill. The spring air carried winter's lingering bite as Sarah stepped onto the porch, her father's old Spencer rifle comfortable in her hands. Wolves had been picking off calves from the Henderson place 2 miles north, and she wouldn't risk their small herd. The cattle were more than livestock. They represented survival for her and the child she carried. Moving through her morning routine with practiced efficiency, Sarah fed the chickens, checked the fence line, and drew fresh water from the well. Each task had its own rhythm, a melody of purpose that helped quiet the echoing emptiness of the house. The doctor from town had suggested she sell the place, move in with her sister in Bozeman where proper care would be available for her condition. But Sarah knew she'd suffocate within a week of city living. Besides, the homestead was more than property. It was the dream she and James had built together. Every fence post, every repaired shingle, every struggling apple sapling bore witness to their shared vision. Even now, she could see him standing by the barn, teaching her to mend tack with his careful stitches. "Take your time, love," he'd say. "Speed comes with practice, but precision keeps a man alive when he's 30 miles from nowhere." The sound of approaching hoofbeats pulled Sarah from her reverie. Instinctively, she moved into the shadow of the barn, rifle ready. The Indian wars might be settling, but the territory still held dangers for a woman alone. Marshal Hayes rode into view, his badge catching the morning sun. Sarah relaxed slightly, but kept the rifle visible. Something about the man's too-perfect smile had always set James on edge, though he'd never said why. "Mrs. Mitchell," Hayes touched the brim of his hat. "Checking on the widow's welfare. Town council's concerned. Woman in your condition out here alone." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I appreciate the concern, Marshal, but we're managing just fine." "We?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "Speaking for 2 already, are you?" "3, if you count the Almighty." Sarah's voice remained pleasant, but her grip on the rifle tightened. "He's been keeping good company lately." Hayes's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, if you need anything, been some talk of an escaped prisoner in the territory. Dangerous man, shot his way out of custody up in Helena. You see any strangers? You let me know straight away." "Of course, Marshal." Sarah watched him ride away, troubled by the predatory grace in his posture. James's pocket watch seemed to grow heavier in her apron pocket, a cold weight warning of changes on the horizon. Inside, she added another log to the cooking fire and began kneading bread dough with swift, sure movements. The work kept her hands busy while her mind circled back to Hayes's warning. James had once mentioned that the marshal had his own notion of justice, one that didn't always align with the law's written word. The baby kicked, a flutter like hope beneath her heart. Sarah smiled, dusting flour from her hands. "Just us for now, little one," she murmured. "But your papa taught me well, and we'll keep his dream alive together." She glanced at the family Bible on its shelf, where James's watch now rested. The homestead might be silent, but it was far from empty. Every corner held memories, lessons, and the quiet strength of a love that defied even death's boundaries. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Sarah shaped the dough into loaves. A spring storm was building over the mountains, and the evening ahead promised to be a long one. She had no way of knowing that by morning her solitary world would be irrevocably changed by a stranger's desperate arrival. The storm arrived with Montana's typical ferocity, sheets of rain drumming against the cabin's sturdy logs. Sarah had just finished securing the livestock when the first lightning bolt split the sky, illuminating the yard in stark relief. The air held that peculiar heaviness that often preceded hail, and she silently thanked James for insisting on metal roofing instead of wooden shakes. A clap of thunder sent the horses whinnying in their stalls, and Sarah paused in the doorway, counting the seconds between flash and sound, as her father had taught her. The storm's heart was moving closer, driving before it a wind that moaned. Through the prairie grass, like a dying thing, she was latching the door when she heard it, a sound distinct from the storm's chaos. A thud, followed by the scrape of boots on her porch boards. Sarah's hand moved to the rifle beside the door, but something in the quality of that sound gave her pause. Not the confident stride of a bandit, but the desperate shuffle of someone at the end of their strength. Lightning flashed again as she eased the door open, rifle ready. The sight stopped her breath. A man lay crumpled against her porch railing, one hand pressed to his shoulder, where dark liquid seeped between his fingers. Rain plastered his clothes to his frame, and his face was grey beneath several days' worth of beard. "Please," he managed, his voice barely carrying above the storm. Sarah hesitated only a moment. James would have cautioned prudence, but she couldn't leave anyone to die in this weather. Besides, a man intent on violence wouldn't be bleeding. Out on her porch. "Can you stand?" she asked, keeping the rifle visible but lowered. He tried, managing to get one leg under him before slumping back. "Sorry, ma'am. Been riding 2 days straight." Setting the rifle within easy reach, Sarah gripped him under his good arm. He was solid muscle, but blood loss had weakened him considerably. Together they managed to get him inside and onto the hearth rug before his legs gave out entirely. "Saddlebag," he gasped. "Important papers." "Your horse first," Sarah said firmly. "Then we'll see to your things." But when she opened the door again, there was no horse in sight. Only an empty saddlebag lay in the mud, its contents presumably scattered by the wind. She retrieved it quickly, noting the quality of the leather despite its weathered condition. Inside, the stranger had lost consciousness. Sarah worked quickly, cutting away his shirt to reveal the wound. The bullet had gone clean through his shoulder, missing anything vital, but the edges were angry and hot to the touch. Infection setting in. As she cleaned and bandaged the injury, Sarah took stock of her patient. His hands bore calluses consistent with ranch work, but there was something more, a deliberate way he had carried himself even while stumbling, a alertness that lingered even in unconsciousness. Military training, perhaps. James had moved the same way, a legacy of his cavalry days. The stranger's face relaxed in unconsciousness, losing its hard edges. Younger than she'd first thought, probably no more than 30. Handsome, too, in a weathered way, with lines around his eyes that spoke more of laughter than hardship. Thunder cracked overhead as Sarah finished her work, and the stranger stirred, eyes flying open. Quick as a snake, his hand caught her wrist. But there was no violence in his grip, only the instinct of a man used to watching his back. "Easy," Sarah said calmly. "You're safe here." His eyes, fever-bright but intelligent, searched her face. Whatever he found there made him relax his hold. "Thank you, ma'am. Most folks wouldn't take the risk. My husband taught me to judge a man by his eyes, not his circumstances." Sarah busied herself wringing out a cool cloth. "Rest now. Questions can wait until morning." He was already drifting off, but his mouth curved slightly. "Your husband sounds like a wise man." "He was," Sarah said softly, but the stranger didn't hear, having slipped back into unconsciousness. Outside, the storm raged on, but Sarah's attention remained on her unexpected guest. There would be consequences for helping him, she was certain. But as she watched the steady rise and fall of his chest, she couldn't bring herself to regret her choice. The sodden saddlebag lay forgotten by the door, its secret still untold. Dawn brought clarity to more than just the storm-washed sky. Sarah had dozed in James's old rocking chair, waking every hour to check her patient's fever and change the cool cloths on his forehead. Now, as morning light crept through the windows, she studied the contents of the waterlogged saddlebag spread before her on the kitchen table. A spare shirt, a weathered Bible, a few basic supplies, all ordinary enough. But beneath the practical items, she'd found something that made her blood run cold, a wanted poster, the ink still legible despite water damage. The face sketched there was unmistakably that of her sleeping guest, though the description below seemed at odds with the man she'd observed. "Michael Caine," she read softly, "wanted for murder and escape from custody, armed and dangerous." The reward listed was substantial. $500, enough to secure her and her child's future. Yet something about the poster nagged at her. The artist's rendering captured his features, but missed something essential about his character, like a portrait painted by someone who'd never met their subject. A floorboard creaked behind her. "Suppose you'll be sending for the marshal now." Sarah didn't startle at his voice, though her heart quickened. She turned slowly, noting how he leaned against the doorframe. Pale, but steady. His eyes were clear now, the fever having broken in the night. "That depends," she said carefully, one hand resting near James's revolver on the shelf, "on whether this poster tells the truth." His laugh held no humor. "Truth's a slippery thing in the territories, ma'am, especially when it wears a badge." "Then tell me your version." Sarah gestured to the chair across from her. "I've found most men reveal their character in how they tell their stories." He studied her for a long moment before easing into the offered seat. His movements were controlled, mindful of his injured shoulder. "Name really is Michael Caine, that much is true. Was a Texas Ranger before the war, then rode with the 1st Cavalry. After, I took work as a hired gun. Legitimate work, protecting ranch interests." Sarah poured coffee, pushing a cup toward him. "And the murder charge? Man died in Helena. Marshal Hayes claimed he saw me do it." Michael's hands wrapped around the cup but didn't lift it. "Truth is, Hayes killed him himself. I saw it happen. Been running ever since, trying to stay alive. Long enough to prove it." "Hayes?" Sarah's fingers tightened on her own cup. "Our Marshal Hayes." Michael's eyes sharpened at her tone. "You know him. He was here yesterday, warning me about a dangerous fugitive." She met his gaze steadily. "James, my husband, never trusted him. Said Hayes had his own interpretation of justice. Your husband was a perceptive man." Michael finally sipped his coffee. "Hayes has been building his own empire out here, controlling water rights, lending money at criminal rates, making problems disappear for a price. The man he killed was about to expose it all." Sarah stood, moving to the window. The morning sun painted the prairie gold, deceptively peaceful. "Evidence? In a strong box in Butte. Friends holding it for me, but Hayes's men watch every trail, every town." His voice carried the weariness of a man who'd run out of options. Turning back, Sarah saw not a dangerous criminal, but a man ground down by circumstance, fighting a battle that seemed impossible to win. She thought of James, of his unwavering belief in standing against wrong, no matter the cost. "The wanted poster says you're dangerous," she said quietly. "Only to those who've earned it, ma'am." Their eyes met across the kitchen, and in that moment, Sarah made her decision. Perhaps it was foolish, perhaps it was the pregnancy affecting her judgment, but she trusted her instincts. James had always said she could read people better than any book. "Well, Mr. Kane," she said, moving to stoke the fire, "I suppose we'd better get you properly healed up then. Can't very well expose a corrupt marshal if you're bleeding all over my clean floors." The surprise on his face was quickly replaced by something deeper: gratitude, respect, and perhaps a hint of hope. "Why would you risk this? You don't know me." Sarah touched James's pocket watch, taking comfort in its familiar weight. "Because sometimes doing right isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about recognizing truth when you see it, even if it wears a stranger's face." The next few days fell into an uneasy rhythm. Sarah kept a journal of Michael's recovery, noting every change in his condition with the same careful attention she'd once given to tracking the homestead's expenses. The infection in his shoulder fought stubbornly, but her mother's old remedies, yarrow poultice and willowbark tea, gradually won the battle. During his fevered moments, Michael spoke in fragments of memory. Names, places, broken pieces of battles long past. Sometimes he called out in his sleep, reaching for weapons that weren't there. Sarah learned to wake him with words rather than touch, having seen how quickly his hands could move, even in weakness. "You've done this before," he observed one evening as she changed his bandages. The fire cast shifting shadows across the cabin walls, making the space feel smaller, more intimate. "James came back from the war with a bullet in his leg," Sarah replied, her fingers steady despite the memory. "Taught me proper wound care while I was treating him. Said a woman who couldn't handle blood had no business being a rancher's wife." Michael watched her work, his eyes thoughtful. "He sounds like a practical man." "He was?" Sarah secured the fresh bandage. "Practical enough to teach me everything he knew about running this place. Shooting, riding, even basic veterinary care. Said he never wanted me helpless if something happened to him." She smiled faintly. "I thought he was being overly cautious at the time. He was protecting what he loved." Michael's voice held a depth of understanding that made Sarah look up. "That's a kind of practicality born of wisdom, not fear." The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, and Sarah pressed a hand to her side, earning a concerned look from Michael. "The little one's active today," she explained. "James used to say he could feel the strength in those kicks. Said we're going to have a cattle driver for sure." "May I?" Michael gestured tentatively toward her belly, then immediately looked embarrassed by his own presumption. "Forgive me, that's not—" "It's all right." Sarah took his hand, guided it to where the baby was moving. Something shifted in his expression as he felt the life beneath his palm, a softening around his eyes, a hint of wonder replacing his habitual wariness. "Strong indeed," he murmured, "like its mother." Sarah found herself holding her breath, caught by the warmth in his gaze. Then the moment broke as a board creaked outside, and Michael was instantly alert, his hand moving toward the rifle she kept within reach. It was only a raccoon, but the tension remained. Reality couldn't be held at bay forever. Sarah busied herself with her medical journal, recording the day's observations while Michael stared into the fire. "Hayes won't stop looking," he said finally. "The longer I stay, the more danger I bring to your door. The longer you stay, the stronger you'll be when he does come." Sarah closed her journal firmly. A man can't outride a bullet in his shoulder, no matter how just his cause. Michael's smile held a trace of his former humor. "You have an answer for everything, don't you? Comes from living alone. No one else to argue with." Sarah stood, wincing at the way her back protested. "Besides, James always said God helps those who help themselves. Right now, you need help and I need—" She trailed off, unsure how to finish that thought. "Company?" Michael suggested gently. "Purpose," she corrected, though his word wasn't wrong. "Something beyond waiting for the baby and watching the seasons change." He nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "Still, we'll need a plan." Hayes isn't a man who leaves loose ends untied. Then we'll make one. Sarah touched James's pocket watch, drawing strength from its familiar presence. Tomorrow, when you're stronger. For now, rest. Doctor's orders. As she turned to bank the fire for the night, Michael caught her hand. His touch was light, respectful, but it sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for this," he gestured to his healing shoulder, "but for believing in me. It's been a long time since anyone did." Sarah squeezed his hand once before letting go. "Faith's like a muscle, Mr. Kane. Gets stronger with use." That night, as she lay in her bed listening to Michael's steady breathing from the other room, Sarah realized something had shifted between them. Something as subtle as a change in wind direction, but just as significant for the storm it might herald. Marshal Hayes's badge caught the late morning sun as he dismounted, the silver star throwing fractured light across the yard. Sarah had seen him approaching from the kitchen window, giving her precious minutes to help Michael into the root cellar, beneath the pantry floor. Now she stood on her porch, one hand resting casually near the doorframe where James's revolver lay hidden behind a loose board. "Twice in 1 week, Marshal," she said pleasantly. "To what do I owe the honor?" Hayes removed his hat, revealing hair prematurely grey at the temples. His smile was practiced, almost paternal, but his eyes remained cold as he surveyed the homestead. "Found some interesting tracks leading this way, Mrs. Mitchell. Thought I should investigate, being concerned for your welfare and all." "Tracks?" Sarah kept her voice mild, though her heart quickened. "Horse with a distinctive gait, favoring its left front leg, I'd say." Hayes moved closer, his spurs ringing against the porch boards. "Rider would have been wounded, probably desperate. The kind of man who might force himself on a woman's hospitality." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "No one's forced anything on me, Marshal, though I appreciate your concern. Do you now?" Hayes reached into his vest, withdrawing a folded paper. "Because I've got witnesses saw blood on the trail leading this way, and a wanted poster that says helping such a man would be a serious crime. Aiding and abetting, they call it." He paused, studying her face. "Could mean prison time. Shame for a child to be born behind bars." The threat hung in the air between them, clear as morning frost. Sarah felt the baby move, a flutter of protest against the tension in her body. She thought of Michael below, probably hearing every word, and prayed he'd stay hidden. "That's quite a leap, Marshal," she said carefully. "From horse tracks to threatening a pregnant woman with prison. Makes me wonder what kind of man would do such a thing." Something dangerous flickered in Hayes's eyes. "The kind of man who's trying to protect you from your own foolishness, Mrs. Mitchell. The kind who knows how grief can cloud a woman's judgment. Or perhaps," Sarah suggested quietly, "the kind of man my husband warned me about. The kind who thinks having authority means owning the truth." Hayes's smile vanished. He stepped closer, using his height to loom over her. "Your husband died of pneumonia, didn't he? Terrible thing, being unable to breathe. I hear drowning similar, water in the lungs, desperate gasping. Sometimes accidents happen on homesteads, especially to women alone." Before Sarah could respond, a horse whinnied from the barn. Hayes's hand dropped to his gun as he turned, but it was only one of her own animals shifting in its stall. When he looked back, Sarah had moved slightly, positioning herself more squarely in the doorway. "I think you should leave now, Marshal," she said, her voice firm, "unless you have a warrant to search my property." "Not yet." Hayes settled his hat back on his head, but his expression promised future trouble. "But I will. And when I do, Mrs. Mitchell, remember, you had a chance to do this the easy way." Sarah watched him mount and ride away, her hand steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. Only when he disappeared over the rise did she allow herself to sag against the doorframe. Michael emerged from the cellar, his face dark with anger. "I should have confronted him. A man who'd threaten a pregnant woman would have shot you without hesitation," Sarah finished. "And then where would the truth be?" "Dead and buried with you, I expect." She moved to the stove, needing the familiar routine of making coffee. to settle her nerves. Michael followed, his footsteps near silent on the plank floor, a hunter's walk, careful and controlled. "He'll be back," Michael said softly. "With more men and a warrant he's probably writing himself right now." Sarah poured 2 cups, adding a splash of cream to hers. "Then we'd better make sure there's nothing for him to find when he does." She touched James's pocket watch, drawing strength from its solid presence. "My husband had a saying about men. Like Hayes, a badge that's only silver-plated will always show its true metal underneath." Michael accepted the coffee, his fingers brushing hers. "Sarah, I can't ask you to risk." "You're not asking," she interrupted. "I'm choosing, and James taught me that once you choose your ground, you stand it." Outside, storm clouds gathered. Over the distant mountains, Sarah felt the weather in her bones, a warning of changes to come. But as she met Michael's troubled gaze, she knew with certainty that she'd made the right choice. Some battles were worth the risk, and some truths demanded to be defended, no matter the cost. That evening, Sarah found an old letter tucked in the lining of Michael's saddlebag while searching for anything that might need burning before Hayes's return. The paper was worn at the creases, clearly read many times, and the handwriting bore the careful precision of someone who'd learned their letters late in life. "My daughters," Michael said quietly from behind her. He'd moved like a shadow again, though Sarah was getting used to his silent ways. "Emma, she was 12 when that came." Sarah started to return the letter, but he shook his head. "Read it. You deserve to know who you're harboring." The letter was simple. A child's news about school and friends, ending with, "I miss you, Papa. Mama says your work is important, but please come home soon." The date caught Sarah's eye, 3 years ago. "I never made it home," Michael said, easing into a chair by the fire. Hayes saw to that. Sarah settled in James's rocker, one hand absently rubbing her belly as the baby stirred. "Tell me." "I was investigating water rights disputes near Helena. Ranchers' cattle dying mysteriously, springs drying up overnight." Hayes was already marshal. Then, building his reputation as a man who could solve problems for a price. Michael's voice grew distant, remembering. "Found out he was damming upstream creeks, forcing ranchers to pay for access to their own water." "But that wasn't all," Sarah prompted gently. "No." Michael's hands clenched. "One rancher, old man Cooper, wouldn't pay, said he'd rather die than be extorted. Hayes obliged him, made it look like a fall from his horse. But Cooper's son knew better, started gathering evidence, building a case." Sarah could guess what came next. "The murder Hayes blamed on you." Michael nodded. "Young Cooper had everything. Documents, witnesses, even Hayes' own ledger showing payments. He came to me for help, trusting my ranger background. We were meant to meet at dawn, take the evidence to the territorial governor." His laugh held no humor. "Hayes was waiting instead. Shot Cooper dead, planted evidence pointing to me. Perfect solution. Silenced his threat and gained a scapegoat in one move. But you escaped. Barely. Took a bullet doing it." Michael touched his side, where Sarah suspected another scar lay hidden. "Been running ever since, trying to find Cooper's evidence. Hayes's men found most of it, but not the ledger. Cooper had hidden it separately, told me where, just before we parted that night. If I can reach Butte." Sarah rose, moving to a loose floorboard near the hearth. From beneath it, she withdrew a small leather-bound book. "Your daughter deserves to know her father's innocent," she said softly, "and I need Hayes's influence gone before this little one arrives." Michael watched her, understanding dawning. "You're proposing we work together. I'm proposing we finish what young Cooper started." Sarah's voice held the same quiet determination that had kept her on the homestead after James's death. "I know these hills better than Hayes's men. Know which neighbors can be trusted, which trails the law never watches." "It's too dangerous," Michael protested, but his eyes had sparked with hope. "If Hayes found out you're helping me, he already suspects. Might as well earn his hatred properly." Sarah smiled slightly. "Besides, James always said half of victory is choosing the right ground to fight on. This is my ground, Michael. I know every creek, every cave, every hidden path. He studied her for a long moment, seeing perhaps what James had seen. Not just a rancher's wife, but a partner worth trusting with your life. Tell me your plan. Sarah opened James's old map on the table, weighted with familiar objects. His pocket watch, her mother's Bible, Michael's daughter's letter. Hayes controls the main roads, but there are older trails, Indian paths, hunters' tracks. We can reach Butte without touching a major trail, if we're careful. Michael moved to stand. Beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. And the evidence? We gather more along the way. Hayes has made enemies, people who've lost land, water rights, loved ones. They just need someone to stand first. She met his gaze. Sometimes all justice needs is one person willing to speak truth, no matter the cost. Outside, an owl called. 3 times, sharp and clear. Sarah's signal from her nearest neighbor that the road was clear. For now. Michael touched the letter from his daughter, then Sarah's hand. When do we start? Tomorrow, Sarah said firmly. Tonight we plan, and pray that Emma's next letter finds her father a free man. In the firelight, their shadows merged on the cabin wall. 2 people brought together by fate and justice, plotting a course that would either save them both or doom them together. But as Sarah caught the glint of determination in Michael's eyes, she felt only certainty. Some risks were worth taking, and some truths had to be told, no matter the price. They came at dawn, when the morning mist still clung to the hollows. Sarah heard the horses first, 6, maybe 7 riders approaching from the east. She'd been awake already, unable to sleep, as the baby had been particularly active through the night. Now she blessed that restlessness as she moved with practiced quiet to the hidden cellar door beneath the pantry's loose floorboards. Michael was already alert, weapon ready, but she shook her head. "No shooting," she whispered, "not unless there's no choice. Help me with this." Together, they lifted the heavy trapdoor, revealing the space James had built beneath. Originally, for storing root vegetables, but he'd expanded it during the Indian troubles, creating a refuge big enough for a family. The walls were shored with sturdy timber, and a clever pipe system allowed for air circulation. "It's solid," Sarah assured, him hearing the riders draw closer. "James tested it himself. You can hear everything above, but they won't hear you." Michael caught her hand before descending. "Sarah, if they find any trace, they won't." She squeezed his fingers once, then pulled away. "Trust me." After securing the door and replacing the floorboards, Sarah moved swiftly through the cabin, erasing signs of Michael's presence. His coffee cup joined her breakfast dishes in the wash basin. His bedding was already hidden. Only the medical supplies remained out, but those could be explained. Many homesteaders kept such things on hand. The pounding on her door came just as she finished smoothing her hair. Sarah took a deep breath, channeling her mother's teachings about maintaining dignity under pressure, and opened the door. Hayes stood flanked by 5 deputies, all wearing badges that gleamed too brightly to have been earned through honest service. Behind them, a 6th man held the horses. "Mrs. Mitchell." Hayes's smile hadn't improved since yesterday. "We have a warrant to search these premises." Sarah accepted the paper he thrust forward, reading it carefully as James had taught her to. "Read any official document?" "Everything appears in order, Marshal, though I do wonder why you need 6 men to search a widow's home." "Better safe than sorry." Hayes shouldered past her, already gesturing to his men. "Check everything. Every corner, every closet. Pay special attention to the barn and any outbuildings." Sarah sat calmly in her rocking chair, one hand resting on her belly, as the men tore through her home. They were thorough, but clumsy, lacking the precision of true lawmen. She watched them rifle through her clothes, upturn her mattress, even probe the chimney with long poles. Only Hayes moved with real purpose, his eyes missing nothing. When he approached the pantry, Sarah's heart quickened, but she forced herself to remain still. He studied the floorboards for a long moment, even tapping one with his boot. "Solid construction," she commented mildly. "James believed in doing things right the first time." Hayes's eyes narrowed at her calm tone. He knelt, running his hands over the boards, searching for seams. Sarah silently thanked James for his perfectionism. The trapdoor's edges aligned so precisely they were nearly invisible. "Your husband was quite the craftsman," Hayes said, standing. "Shame he's not here to protect you from poor decisions." "James taught me to protect myself," Sarah replied evenly, "along with other useful skills, like knowing the difference between law and tyranny." A crash from the kitchen interrupted Hayes's response. One of his deputies had dropped her mother's china teapot, shattering it beyond repair. Sarah's hands clenched in her lap, but she kept her face composed. "Careful with the lady's things," Hayes called, though his tone suggested he cared little for the destruction. To Sarah, he added quietly, "Things break so easily, don't they? Teapots, laws, lives. Some things don't break, Marshall. They just bend until they're strong enough to spring back." The search continued for over an hour. Sarah could hear Michael shifting slightly below during the closest moments, but the cellar's construction muffled even that. Finally, Hayes was forced to admit defeat. "Nothing today, Mrs. Mitchell." His voice carried a promise of future visits. "But we'll be watching. A woman in your condition shouldn't be taking unnecessary risks." "The only risk I see," Sarah said as she showed them out, "is allowing fear to make us forget the difference between justice and power." She stood on her porch, watching until the riders disappeared over the rise. Only then did she allow her shoulders to sag, one hand pressing against the doorframe for support. Michael emerged from the cellar as quietly as he'd entered it, his face dark with anger at the destruction left behind. "Sarah, I'm so sorry about your mother's teapot." "It's just a thing," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. "But it proved something important. Hayes is scared. A man that powerful doesn't destroy teapots unless he's desperate. Or dangerous," Michael added softly. Sarah straightened, squaring her shoulders. "Both, which means we're on the right track." She touched James's pocket watch, drawing strength from its familiar weight. "But we'll need to move soon. He'll be back, and next time he'll bring men who know how to search." "Properly," Michael nodded, already helping her set the cabin back in order. Together they worked in comfortable silence, each understanding that while this skirmish had been won, the real battle was just beginning. Sarah spent the morning after Hayes's search, marking escape routes on James's old territory map, but the baby's increasingly forceful movements kept breaking her concentration. The kicks had taken on a different quality lately. Sharper, more urgent. Something felt off, though she couldn't quite name what. "There's an old mining trail here," she explained to Michael, trying to ignore another uncomfortable twist in her belly. "Abandoned after the silver played out. Hayes's men won't know it, but we'll need to time it carefully. The first quarter-mile is exposed before it drops into the canyon." Michael looked up from cleaning his revolver, his eyes narrowing as he watched her press a hand to her side. "How far along are you, really?" 7 months, give or take." Sarah attempted a reassuring smile, but another pain pulled it into a grimace. "Though this little one seems eager to change that calculation." "We need to get you to a doctor." Michael's voice held no room for argument. "These aren't normal movements. The nearest doctor who won't immediately send word to Hayes is in Butte." Sarah traced the route with her finger. 3 days hard. Ride if we're lucky. 2 weeks if we take the safe paths. Then we'll figure something else out." Michael set aside his gun, moving to support her as another wave of discomfort made her sway. "You're in no condition to—" A knock at the door froze them both. Through the window, Sarah caught a glimpse of Martha Webber's faded blue bonnet. The midwife was early for their monthly check, but her timing couldn't have been better. "Hide," Sarah whispered to Michael. "Martha's trustworthy, but the less she knows, the safer she'll be." Once Michael was concealed in the root cellar, Sarah opened the door. Martha bustled in, her weathered face creased with concern. "Sarah Mitchell, I had such a feeling about you this morning. Call it an old woman's intuition, but something told me to come early." She set down her medical bag, eyeing Sarah critically. "And by the look of you, I was right to worry." The examination that followed confirmed Sarah's fears. "The baby's shifted," Martha announced. Her usual cheerful manner turned serious. "Not dangerously yet, but heading that way. You need bed. Rest and careful watching. I'll stay with you." "You can't," Sarah protested. "Your daughter's expecting her own child any day in town." "Then I'm sending for Dr. Wallace." Martha's tone brooked no argument. "He may be new to the territory, but he's got good hands and better sense." Sarah's heart sank. The new doctor was an unknown quantity. Having him in the house with Michael hidden away would be desperately dangerous. But the baby kicked again, hard enough to make her gasp, and she knew they were running out of options. After Martha left, Michael emerged from hiding. He took one, looked at Sarah's face and said, "Tell me." She explained the situation while he paced the kitchen, his ranger's training evident in the way he analyzed each new factor. Finally, he stopped, meeting her eyes. "We have to go, now, before the doctor arrives." "Michael, I can barely sit a horse, which is why we'll take the wagon." He held up a hand to forestall her objection. "Listen, Hayes expects us to run for Butte. He'll have every road and trail watched." "But what about Carson City?" Sarah blinked. "Nevada? That's twice the distance, and the opposite direction from where Hayes is looking." Michael spread the map on the table. "There's a doctor there, Joshua Braden. He served with me in the Rangers. More importantly, he's helped other people Hayes has hunted. We get you there, you'll have proper care and protection while I double back for the evidence in Butte." "You make it sound so simple." Sarah traced the proposed route, her mind working. Despite her discomfort, "We'd need supplies, a cover story." "Already have one." Michael retrieved a carefully folded paper from his saddlebag. "Marriage certificate, blank but properly sealed. Found it among Hayes's papers that night in Helena. Figured it might prove useful." Sarah stared at him. "You want us to pose as husband and wife?" "A pregnant woman traveling with her husband draws less attention than a widow running with a wanted man." His voice softened. "I know it's not ideal, but—" "No," Sarah interrupted, another pain sharpening her decision. "It's practical. James would approve." She managed a small smile. "He always said proper papers solve half your problems in the territories." Michael's relief was visible. "We'll leave at dusk. Less chance of being seen, and the evening stage will have Hayes's men busy watching the roads." He touched her shoulder gently. "Try to rest until then. I'll handle the preparations." Sarah nodded, but as she lay down, her hand found James's pocket watch. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the memory of her first husband, "but I think you'd understand. Sometimes survival means making choices you never thought you'd face." The watch ticked steadily in response, like a heart beating out seconds until everything would change. Sarah hadn't wanted to risk the trip to town, but they needed supplies they couldn't do without. Medical supplies most urgently. She tied her bonnet tight against the spring wind, hoping its brim would help hide her face. The morning stage had just arrived, meaning Hayes's men would be watching the road out of town rather than the street itself. 10 minutes, Michael had insisted. When they'd parted at the edge of town, he'd taken the wagon around to Thompson's feed store, where his ranger-trained bearing would pass for just another ranch hand picking up supplies. "Any longer, and I'm coming in after you." The general store's bell chimed softly as Sarah entered. Old Mrs. Henderson looked up from her ledger, spectacles slipping down her nose. "Sarah Mitchell! Didn't expect to see you in town, not with—" She stopped abruptly, and Sarah saw the wanted poster hanging behind the counter. Michael's face stared out from beside advertisements for patent medicine and cattle auctions. "Just need a few things." "Mrs. Henderson," Sarah kept her voice steady, expecting a hard spring. She was selecting bandages when she heard Hayes's voice from the back room, speaking to someone in low, urgent tones. Sarah froze, then forced herself to move naturally, behind a tall shelf of dry goods. Through a gap in the canned beans, she could just make out Hayes and a well-dressed stranger. "It doesn't matter now," the stranger was saying. "Governor's sending investigators. Someone's been asking questions about water rights and property transfers." "Damn Cooper and his meddling," Hayes growled. "Even dead, He's causing trouble. Who's behind it? Judge Madison's daughter. She was sweet on the boy, apparently, been gathering statements from ranchers all through the territory. Sarah's heart pounded. Another piece of the puzzle, another ally they hadn't known existed. If they could reach the judge's daughter before Hayes, a floorboard creaked behind her. Sarah turned to find Mrs. Henderson, concern etched in her weathered face. The old woman pressed a finger to her lips, then gestured toward the store's side door. Sarah nodded gratefully, understanding the gift she was being offered. But as she moved toward escape, Hayes's next words stopped her cold. "Send Bradley and Cooper's old foreman to the Mitchell place tonight. Make it look like an accident. Fire, maybe. Tragic thing. Pregnant widow all alone." The stranger's voice held doubt. A fire might draw attention. Better than leaving a witness who can place Cain in the area. Besides, Hayes's laugh held no humor. Accidents happen. To women alone. I warned her about that. Sarah's hands trembled as she eased the side door open. The alley beyond was empty, save for a mangy cat watching her with suspicious eyes. She hurried toward Thompson's, her mind racing. They'd have to move faster than planned. No waiting for dusk now. She found Michael loading the last of the feed. Sacks. One look at her face, and he was reaching for his gun. "Not here," she whispered, then louder for anyone watching. "That's perfect. Thank you kindly." She climbed carefully onto the wagon seat, maintaining the fiction of normalcy, though. Her hands shook. "We need to go now." Michael clucked to the horses, guiding them unhurriedly down the street. Only when they'd passed the town limits did he ask, "How bad?" "Hayes is sending men to burn the homestead. Tonight," Sarah's voice caught. "And there's more. Judge Madison's daughter, Emily Madison." Michael's hands tightened on the reins. "She and Cooper were courting before. She's been gathering evidence. Statements from other ranchers Hayes has ruined." Sarah touched his arm. "Michael, she might have enough to—" A rifle shot cracked across the morning air. The wagon's back panel splintered, sending wood shards flying. Sarah ducked instinctively as Michael slapped the reins, urging the horses to a gallop. "Looks like Hayes saw through our timing," Michael shouted above the thunder of hooves. He handed Sarah the reins. "Get us to the creek wash. You know where. To go!" She took the reins as he turned in the seat, returning fire at the riders emerging from the tree line. The baby kicked hard, protesting the rough ride, but Sarah gritted her teeth and guided the horses toward the creek bed that would give them cover. A bullet whined past her ear, another thudded into the seat between them. But Sarah kept her focus on the path ahead, trusting Michael to keep their pursuers at bay. The creek wash was just ahead, its steep banks offering protection and a chance to disappear into the maze of water-carved channels beyond. James had taught her these paths. Now they might save not just her life, but her future. The creek wash opened before them like a wound in the earth, its steep banks carved by generations of spring floods. Sarah guided the horses down the treacherous slope, letting the wagon slide. In a controlled descent that sent loose shale clattering behind them. Michael's accurate fire had bought them precious seconds, forcing their pursuers to dismount and approach more cautiously. "Left at the fork," Sarah called out, remembering James's lessons. "The right branch leads to a box canyon." The wagon wheels groaned as they took the turn, splashing through shallow water. The baby kicked again, hard enough to make Sarah gasp. But she kept the reins steady. Behind them, confused shouts echoed as their pursuers discovered the false trail. "There's a cave ahead," she managed between jolts. "Behind a curtain of willows. James used it to shelter cattle during storms." Michael touched her shoulder briefly, understanding in his eyes. "Your husband thought of everything. He—" Sarah broke off as something caught her eye. A saddlebag, half buried in the creek bed. Its leather dark with age. "Stop. That's Cooper's." "Brand!" Michael brought the wagon to a halt, quickly scanning the banks above before helping Sarah down. Together, they retrieved the bag, its contents protected by oiled canvas within. Sarah kept watch while Michael examined their find, her hand steady on James's revolver. "My God," Michael breathed, pulling out a leather-bound journal. This is Hayes's personal ledger, the one Cooper died trying to secure. His fingers moved quickly through the pages. Land deals, water rights, payoffs. Sarah, this is everything. Every crime, every name, every detail. A shot ricocheted off the canyon wall, sending them scrambling back to the wagon. Michael fired twice more as Sarah urged the horses forward. But now she could see his smile despite the danger. "This changes everything," he said, securing the precious documents. Hayes wasn't just squeezing ranchers. He was building an empire. Look at these names: judges, territorial officials, even a senator, all taking cuts from his schemes. The willow cave appeared ahead, its curtain of branches offering concealment. Sarah guided the team through the narrow entrance, the leafy screen closing behind them. The cave beyond was deep enough for the wagon and horses, with a small spring trickling down one wall. Only when they were settled did Michael share the full contents of Hayes's journal. Sarah read by lantern light, her horror growing with each page. The corruption ran deeper than anyone had suspected. Hayes had been systematically destroying anyone who stood against him, using murder, false arrests, and arranged accidents to build his power. "James knew," she whispered, finding her late husband's name in the margins. "That's why he was teaching me everything about the homestead, about surviving alone. He must have suspected Hayes would come for him eventually." Michael's face darkened. "The pneumonia? There was a Dr. Hayes sent, insisted on treating him." Sarah's hands clenched on the journal. "Said the medicine might taste strange, but it was a new formula." "Oh, Sarah." Michael moved closer, offering silent support as the full truth of her husband's death emerged. "We need to get this to Judge Madison," she said finally, squaring her shoulders. "Not just for Cooper or James now, but for everyone Hayes has destroyed." Michael nodded slowly. "The judge's summer house is in Carson City. Emily will be there, gathering statements from other victims." He touched her arm gently. "But with your condition—" "I'm stronger than I look." Sarah managed a small smile. "Besides, this little one seems determined to fight Hayes too." She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the now familiar movements. "Though we'll need to be careful. Hayes will have men watching every road west. Then we don't take roads." Michael spread their map on the wagon seat. "These hills are full of old trails, Indian paths, trappers' routes. Hayes's men won't know them, but I do." Sarah traced a line across the map. "James made sure I learned every back trail and hidden spring. Said knowledge was better than gold in the territories." She looked up at Michael. "We can do this. Together." He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Together." Outside, hoofbeats faded as their pursuers searched the wrong trails. Sarah touched James's pocket watch, drawing strength from its steady ticking. Her first husband had died protecting her from Hayes's corruption. Now she would honor that sacrifice by helping Michael expose the truth. The baby kicked again, gentler this time, as if sensing her resolve. In the lantern's soft light, Sarah saw her future taking shape. Not the quiet widowhood she'd expected, but something brighter, something worth fighting for. They approached the homestead at sunset, using the growing shadows for cover. The silence struck Sarah first. No cattle lowing in the pasture, no chickens settling in for the night. Then she saw the broken windows, dark holes in the cabin's weathered face like missing teeth. "No smoke," Michael observed quietly. "They've already been here." Sarah's hands tightened on the reins. "We need to check. There might be something left worth saving." "It's too dangerous. Hayes's men could be—" "Please," her voice caught. "I need to know." Michael studied the property carefully before nodding. "I'll go first. Stay with the wagon until I signal." She watched him ghost across the yard, moving like the ranger he'd once been. The baby stirred restlessly, perhaps sensing her tension. When Michael's low whistle finally came, Sarah found her legs trembling as she climbed down from the wagon. The cabin's door hung crooked on one hinge. Inside, destruction reigned. Hayes's men had been thorough, driven by spite rather than mere efficiency. Every drawer had been emptied, every cabinet ransacked. Sarah's mother's china lay shattered. on the floor, and James's books had been torn apart, their pages scattered like fallen leaves. But it was the family photographs that broke her. She found them in the ashes of the hearth, deliberately burned. One partially intact image showed her and James on their wedding day, his smile now scarred by flames. "Sarah," Michael's voice was gentle. "We can't stay long." "I know." She knelt carefully, pregnancy making the movement awkward, and retrieved James's pocket watch from where it had fallen, beneath an overturned chair. The glass was cracked, but it still ticked steadily. "Just give me a moment." She moved through the wreckage of her life, salvaging what she could. A few clothes, James's spare revolver from its hidden place beneath the floorboards, her mother's Bible somehow overlooked in the destruction. Each item felt precious now, weighted with memories that Hayes's men couldn't touch. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Michael's gun appeared instantly in his hand, but the sound wasn't repeated. Still, the message was clear. They'd lingered too long. "The root cellar," Sarah whispered. "There might be supplies we can—" Pain knifed through her abdomen, sharp and insistent. She gasped, grabbing the doorframe for support. Michael was beside her instantly, supporting her weight as her knees buckled. "The baby?" She nodded, unable to speak, as another contraction gripped her. Too early, far too early. Michael's face hardened with decision. "We need to move, now. Can you walk?" "Have to." Sarah straightened with effort. "But not far. There's a line shack about 2 miles up in the hills. James built it for winter grazing. Hayes's men won't know about it." They made it halfway to the wagon before hoofbeats thundered in the distance. Michael helped Sarah into the concealment of a dense thicket, then crept back to survey the approach. "4 riders," he reported softly. "Coming fast. Hayes must have had men watching the property." Sarah fought another contraction, trying to keep her breathing quiet. "The creek path. If we can reach it, there's a way up to the shack that horses who can't follow." Michael nodded, but his eyes were worried as he helped her up. They abandoned the wagon, taking only what they could carry. Sarah clutched James's watch and her mother's Bible, leaving everything else behind. Each step was a battle. Now, the baby making its displeasure known, with increasingly urgent movements. They reached the creek just as shouts erupted from the homestead. Hayes's men had found the wagon. Sarah led them to a narrow trail that switched back up the hillside, more game path than proper track. Twice they had to stop as contractions racked. Her body, Michael supporting her weight while watching anxiously for pursuit. The line shack appeared just as darkness was falling, a sturdy one-room shelter tucked against the hillside. Inside, they found basic supplies still intact, dried meat, matches, blankets, James's thoroughness still protecting them. Sarah sank onto the narrow cot as Michael secured the door. Another contraction seized her, and this time she couldn't hold back a cry of pain. "Hold on," Michael urged, his voice rough with concern. "Just hold on. I'll get a fire started, heat some water." But they both knew it might not be enough. The baby was coming, ready or not, and their only help was miles away across territory, crawling with Hayes's men. In the growing darkness, Sarah clutched James's broken pocket watch, its steady ticking a counterpoint to her racing heart. She'd survived loss before. She would survive this, too. She had to. Outside, a wolf howled, long and lonely in the gathering night. From the valley below came the sound of men calling to each other, hunting them. The night ahead would test them both beyond anything they'd yet faced. The line shack's walls seemed to pulse with each contraction, or perhaps it was just Sarah's vision blurring. She'd lost track of time, measuring it only in waves of pain and brief moments of respite. The baby blanket she'd grabbed from the homestead lay ready beside her, a splash of soft white in the lantern's glow. Michael moved between watching the windows and tending to her needs, his ranger's training evident in how he managed both tasks. He'd heated water, torn strips from his spare shirt for bandages, and somehow maintained a calm that helped steady her own nerves. "Tell me about your daughter," Sarah gasped as another contraction built. "Emma, tell me about Emma." Understanding flickered in his eyes. She needed distraction, something to focus on besides fear and pain. She's 15 now, smart as a whip, always reading, wants to be a teacher. His voice grew soft with memory. Has her mother's laugh and my stubborn chin. Never could deny her anything, even when I should have. The contraction peaked, and Sarah grabbed his offered hand. Through clenched teeth she managed, "What was the last thing you denied her?" "A pony. Wild little mustang she'd set her heart on." He smiled, letting her squeeze his hand until her knuckles went white. Course her mother let her have it anyway. Emmy named it Thunder, but that little horse was gentle as a lamb with her. The pain eased slightly, and Sarah fell back against the makeshift pillows. "You'll see her again. We'll make sure of it." "We will." His certainty warmed her. "Just like your little one will know their father through your stories." A sound outside silenced them both. Michael moved to the window, gun ready, but it was only a deer passing in the darkness. The moon had risen, casting silver light through the cracks in the shutters. Somewhere in the distance, Hayes's men were still searching, but the night's vastness kept them at bay for now. The next contraction came too quickly, stronger than before. Sarah bit back a cry, tasting blood where she'd split her lip. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "Too fast. Too early." Michael knelt beside her, real fear showing in his face for the first time. "What do you need me to do?" "Mother's Bible," she managed. "In the back. Notes on birthing." She was a midwife. He retrieved the Bible, carefully opening the delicate pages where Sarah's mother had recorded her years of experience helping new life into the world. Together they read by lantern light, Michael's voice steady as he relayed the instructions, while Sarah fought through each new wave of pain. The baby's turned, she realized finally, remembering Martha's warning. "That's why," her words cut off in a gasp as the strongest contraction yet seized her. "Tell me how to help." Michael's calm broke slightly, his voice rough with concern. Sarah grabbed his arm. "You'll have to turn it. Your hands are smaller than the doctor's. Might be able—" He paled but nodded, following her instructions with the same precision he'd once used to track outlaws. Sarah bit down on a folded cloth, tasting cotton and salt as she fought to stay still through the excruciating process. Just when she thought she couldn't bear another moment, something shifted inside her. The next contraction felt different, right, finally, after so many wrong ones. "It's time," she breathed. The hour that followed tested them both. Michael proved as steady in this as he was with a gun, following Sarah's gasped directions without flinching. Outside, a storm rolled in, thunder masking her cries as the final moments approached. "Once more," Michael encouraged, his voice hoarse. "Almost there, Sarah. One more." She gave everything she had left, thinking of James, of the home they'd built, of the future she couldn't quite see but refused to surrender. With a final, tremendous effort, she felt the baby slip free into Michael's waiting hands. For one terrible moment, silence filled the shack. Then a lusty cry split the air, strong and indignant, announcing its arrival to the storm-swept night. "A girl," Michael said softly, wrapping the tiny form in the rescued blanket. "Perfect and whole." Sarah reached for her daughter with trembling hands. The baby's face was red and angry, but she quieted as Sarah held her close. "Hello, little. And you've caused quite a stir tonight." "Just like her mama," Michael smiled, his eyes suspiciously bright as he watched them together. "Strong enough to shake up the whole territory." Through the window, dawn's first light began to pearl the sky. Sarah touched James's watch where it lay beside her, then looked up at Michael, seeing in his face the same fierce protectiveness she felt. They had survived the night, but morning would bring new challenges. For now, though, they had this moment, a new life born into pain and danger, yet promising hope as fresh as the coming day. 3 days after Grace's birth, Sarah had named her daughter for the mercy that had seen them through that night. Martha Weber arrived at the line shack, carrying her medical bag and a face full of determined loyalty. She'd followed the signs Sarah had arranged through her sister. 3 white cloths hung on a washing line meant safe passage needed. "Thought I might find you up here," the midwife said, setting down her bag. Your man James showed me this place. Once said I might need to know it someday. Her sharp eyes took in both mother and child, then fixed on Michael. So, you're the one Hayes wants so badly. Yes, ma'am. Michael stood respectfully, though his hand stayed near his gun. Martha snorted. Put that away. Any man Hayes hates that much is probably worth knowing. She bent to examine the baby, her experienced hands gentle. Strong little thing, despite her early arrival, takes after her mama that way. While she checked Sarah's recovery, Martha shared news from town. Hayes was furious, his men turning the territory upside down in their search. But his aggressive tactics were backfiring, making people question his authority. Judge Madison's girl was through here last week, Martha revealed, rewrapping Grace in her blanket. Clever one, that Emily. Been gathering statements from folks. Hayes has wronged. Found quite a few willing to talk, once somebody showed them they weren't alone. Sarah exchanged glances with Michael. How many? Enough to fill a ledger. Martha's smile held satisfaction. Which is funny, since I hear Hayes has been burning every ledger he can find lately, almost like he's looking for something particular. Michael showed her the water-stained journal they'd recovered. Martha's eyes widened as she read, her weathered face growing hard. Well, she said finally, suppose that explains what really happened to Tom Cooper. And James. She looked at Sarah. You mean to use this? We mean to stop him, Sarah replied, but we'll need help. Martha nodded slowly. Henderson's lost their store to one of Hayes's loans. Webbers, my own kin, lost their water rights. Thompsons had their best grazing land seized for back taxes. That never existed. She straightened her apron decisively. Give me 3 days. I'll send word through the quilting circle. Hayes isn't the only one who can gather allies. She left them with fresh supplies and medicine for Grace. True to her word, helpers began arriving within days. They came in 1s and 2s, using the excuse of hunting or gathering herbs to mask their true purpose. Each brought something useful: food, ammunition, information about Hayes's movements. Ben Thompson, whose feed store had given them cover in town, arrived with his 2 eldest sons and a wagon of supplies. Figured it was time to settle accounts, he said simply, handing Michael a rifle. Hayes killed my brother Jack last spring. Called it a hunting accident. Emily Madison herself came at dusk one evening, her proper dress and perfect manners masking a core of steel. She had her father's legal mind and her own burning need for justice. Tom told me about Hayes the night before he died, she said, showing them her own collected evidence. Made me promise to finish what he started, if anything happened to him. Her eyes met Michael's. He believed in you, you know, said you were the only lawman he ever met who couldn't be bought. Sarah watched the young woman's face as she spoke of Tom Cooper, recognizing the depth of loss behind her composure. Here was another life Hayes had shattered, another future he'd stolen. They worked through the night, combining Emily's legal documents with Hayes's damning ledger. The picture that emerged was devastating, a web of corruption that had ensnared the entire territory. We'll need to get this to the territorial governor, Emily said. All of it with witnesses ready to testify, but Hayes will have the roads watched. Then we don't take roads, Michael replied. He spread their map, showing the network of back trails and hidden paths Sarah had taught him. We create a distraction, something big enough to draw Hayes's attention. While he's focused on that, a smaller group takes the evidence through. Sarah, nursing Grace by the fire, saw the plan taking shape. The old Carson City road, she suggested. Hayes thinks we'll head for Butte. We let him keep thinking that. Emily nodded slowly. My father's summer house in Carson City has a direct line to the governor. If we can get there, we'll get there. Michael's voice held quiet certainty. He looked around the room at their gathered allies. Ranchers, storekeepers, people who'd lost everything to Hayes's greed. Hayes thinks fear will keep people quiet, but fear burns out. Justice lasts. Outside, a wolf howled, soon answered by others. Sarah smiled, remembering James's words about wolves. They survived by working together, protecting their own. Dawn would bring hard choices and dangerous paths. But looking at their daughter, at Michael, at the room full of people willing to stand against Hayes's tyranny, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since James's death. Hope, as bright and unstoppable as the coming day. The stolen ledger lay heavy in Sarah's saddlebag as she rode beside Martha's wagon, Grace sleeping peacefully against her chest in a sling. They'd chosen the most public route into town, the main road, in broad daylight, knowing it was the last thing Hayes would expect. Sometimes, James had said, the best hiding place was in plain sight. Michael and Thompson's sons had left at dawn, making a conspicuous trail toward Butte. Their job was to draw Hayes's attention, leading his men on a chase that would empty the town of its corrupted lore. The wagon creaked as they approached the outskirts, Martha chattering loudly about quilting circles and new babies, just another midwife and her patient making a routine journey. Sarah kept her head down, bonnet shading her face, though her hand never strayed far from James's revolver. They passed two of Hayes's deputies without incident, the men barely glancing at what appeared to be a common enough sight. But as they neared the town center, Sarah spotted something that made her blood run cold. Fresh wanted posters, showing not just Michael's face now, but hers as well. "Keep calm," Martha murmured, though her own hands tightened on the reins. "We're nearly to Henderson's." The general store had become their rallying point, Mrs. Henderson's quiet resistance finding its moment. One by one, their allies would gather there, preparing for what was to come. But as they drew closer, Sarah saw the store's windows were dark. A crowd had gathered in the street, watching as Hayes's men loaded ledgers and papers into a wagon. The marshal himself stood supervising, his badge catching the sun like a mocking wink. "He's searching all the businesses," Martha whispered. "Looking for his journal. Word must have spread that it survived." They tried to turn around naturally, but a shout went up. "Marshal! Ain't that the Weber wagon?" Hayes's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing as he studied them. Sarah felt the moment he recognized her, saw the cold smile spread across his face. "Mrs. Mitchell," he called out, walking toward them with elaborate casualness. "Or should I say, Mrs. Kane, we've been quite concerned about you." Martha's wagon was suddenly surrounded by deputies, guns drawn. Sarah held Grace closer, feeling her daughter stir against her chest. "Now, Marshal," Martha began, but Hayes cut her off. "Save it, Mrs. Weber. Your part in this little drama is over." He reached for the wagon, but stopped at the sound of a hammer being cocked. Sarah had James's revolver aimed steady at Hayes's chest. "Back away," she said quietly. A ripple went through the crowd. Hayes's smile widened, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Threatening a marshal? In front of witnesses? Think carefully, Mrs. Mitchell. That baby of yours will need her mother." "These people have witnessed plenty already," Sarah replied. "How many here have lost land to your schemes, had water rights stolen, loved ones threatened?" Movement in the crowd, faces hardening as truth finally found voice. Hayes's expression shifted, the mask of authority cracking. "You have no proof, don't we?" Emily Madison's voice rang out as she emerged from the crowd holding papers. "I have statements from 30 families, proof of bribes, extortion, murder disguised as accidents." She moved to stand beside Sarah's horse. "And now we have witnesses to your threats against a mother and child." Hayes's hand dropped to his. "And gun," but he was surrounded now by townspeople tired of living in fear. He backed toward his men, eyes darting between faces he'd thought safely cowed. "You really think these sheep will stand against me?" he snarled. "I own this territory. One word from me is worth nothing now," came a new voice. Judge Madison himself stood in the doorway of his office, more armed riders visible behind him. "The governor's investigators arrived this morning, Hayes. It's over." For a moment, Sarah thought Hayes would surrender. Then his gun seemed to materialize in his hand, aimed not at her but at Grace. "Drop the gun, Mrs. Mitchell, or—" The shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Michael emerged from between two buildings, rifle still smoking. "That's where you shot me," he said conversationally. Seemed fitting. Hayes's men, seeing their leader fall and facing armed townspeople on all sides, dropped their weapons. But Hayes himself lunged for Sarah's horse, perhaps hoping to use her as a shield. He never made it. Sarah's bullet took him in the leg, the same place James had taught her to shoot to bring down a charging bull. Hayes collapsed, clutching his knee, all pretense of authority gone. "That's for James," Sarah said softly, then louder to the watching. "Crowd, we have his ledger, every crime, every name, every detail, it's over." Grace began to cry, a hungry, insistent wail that broke the tension. People laughed, then began moving with purpose. Hayes and his men were secured, Emily's evidence was safeguarded, and the long work of restoring justice could begin. Sarah felt Michael's hand on her knee, steady and warm. "You all right?" She nodded, looking down at their daughter, then at the town emerging from its shadow of fear. "We did it," she whispered. "James would be proud." "Yes," Michael agreed softly. He would. The territorial governor's office in Carson City was smaller than Sarah had imagined, though the man himself carried enough authority to fill any room. He sat behind his desk, Hayes's ledger open before him, while Michael stood at parade rest, his ranger training showing through. "This evidence is comprehensive," the governor said finally, looking up. "Mr. Kane, it appears we owe you an apology, and considerably more." Sarah watched from her chair by the window, Grace sleeping peacefully in her arms, as the governor signed the official pardon. The document represented more than Michael's freedom. It was vindication for Tom Cooper, justice for James, hope for every family Hayes had wronged. "The territorial court will need your testimony," the governor continued. "Both of you. We're already receiving telegrams from other jurisdictions where Hayes operated. This corruption apparently runs deeper than anyone suspected." "We'll testify," Michael said quietly, "but first there's something I need to do." The governor nodded, understanding. "Of course, I believe there's someone waiting very anxiously to see you." They heard running footsteps in the hallway. The door burst open, and a young girl with Michael's eyes and chin flew into the room. "Papa!" Sarah felt tears start as she watched Michael catch his daughter, holding her as if he'd never let go again. Emma's face was buried in his shoulder, her words muffled but clear. "I knew you were innocent. I knew you'd come back." When they finally separated, Emma turned to Sarah with shy curiosity. Michael made the introduction. "Emma, this is Sarah Mitchell. She's the one who helped prove the truth, and this," his voice caught slightly, "is Grace." Emma approached carefully, peering at the baby with wonder. "She's so tiny. How old is she?" 2 weeks, Sarah smiled. "Would you like to hold her?" The girl's eyes lit up as Sarah showed her how to support Grace's head. The baby opened her eyes, studying Emma's face with surprising intensity. "She's perfect," Emma whispered. She looked up at her father. "Does this mean, are we going to be a family?" Michael met Sarah's gaze over his daughter's head, something unspoken passing between them. "That's up to Sarah," he said gently. "She's got her own choices to make." The governor cleared his throat. "Speaking of choices, Mrs. Mitchell, there's the matter of your homestead. Hayes's seizure was illegal. The property remains yours. And, given your role in exposing this conspiracy, the territory would be happy to assist with any repairs needed." Sarah touched James's pocket watch, its steady ticking a reminder of promises kept and new possibilities ahead. "Thank you, but I think it's time for a fresh start." Emma looked up hopefully. "You could come to Texas. Papa's ranch is beautiful, and I could help with Grace and—" "Emma," Michael cautioned, but his eyes held the same hope. Sarah stood, moving to the window. Carson City spread below, a city of new beginnings. She thought of her homestead, of the dreams she and James had built there, but James had taught her that love meant wanting happiness for those left behind, and the greatest tribute to his memory would be finding joy again. "Texas sounds nice," she said softly, "if we're welcome." Emma's squeal of delight made Grace startle and cry. As Sarah took her daughter back, she found herself encircled by Michael's arms, his touch tentative but full of promise. "More than welcome," he murmured, "if you're sure." "I am." Sarah leaned into his embrace, feeling pieces of her future falling into place. "But first, we have work to do here." The territorial court convened the next day. Sarah testified about James's death, about Hayes's threats, about the evidence found in the creek bed. Michael detailed the original conspiracy, his voice steady as he described Tom Cooper's murder and his own flight for justice. But it was Emily Madison's testimony that sealed Hayes's fate. She presented document after document, witness statement after witness statement, building an ironclad case that would eventually see Hayes and his conspirators sentenced to long terms in federal prison. After the verdict, as they stood on the courthouse steps, Emily approached Sarah. "Tom would be proud," she said quietly, "of all of this." Sarah squeezed the younger woman's hand. "He'd be proud of you too. You finished what he started." "We all did." Emily smiled, though her eyes were damp. "Will you write from Texas?" "Of course." Sarah watched Michael showing Emma how to gentle a nervous horse in the courthouse yard. "There's always room for family, blood, or chosen." The autumn sun slanted long across the street, painting everything in gold. Grace stirred against Sarah's chest, and James's watch ticked steadily in her pocket, a rhythm like a heartbeat, marking not an ending, but a beginning. The Texas hill country rolled out before them like a green ocean, so different from Montana's stark mountains. Sarah sat on the ranch house porch, watching Emma show Grace a butterfly that had landed on the railing. At 3 months old, Grace was too young to appreciate the gesture, but her wide eyes followed her stepsister's every movement. "She adores you," Sarah said, smiling as Emma gently guided Grace's tiny hand near the butterfly's wings. "Really?" Emma beamed with all the pride of her 15 years. "I've always wanted a sister. I mean..." She hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "I know she's not really..." "Family isn't always about blood," Sarah said softly. "It's about love, about choosing each other every day." The butterfly took flight, drawing Grace's wondering gaze. From the barn came the sound of Michael working with a new horse, his voice carrying clearly in the afternoon air. The ranch was smaller than Sarah's Montana homestead had been, but it felt right. A place where new dreams could take root alongside. Cherished memories. The marriage certificate that had once been their cover story was now genuine, signed in a small Carson City church before they'd left for Texas. Sarah touched her new ring, different from the one James had given her, but carrying its own kind of promise. Michael had understood her need to keep her first ring, now worn on a chain, alongside James's pocket watch. "Love doesn't divide," he'd said. "It multiplies." Emma had been their witness, standing proud in her best dress. Now she was proving to be as much Grace's protector as her sister, fiercely devoted to the baby who had captured her heart. "Papa says we can start breaking ground for the new garden tomorrow," Emma said, settling Grace more comfortably in her lap. "I thought maybe, would you teach me about herbs, like your mother taught you?" Sarah felt warmth bloom in her chest. "I'd love to. And maybe you can teach me about Texas plants. Everything here is so different from Montana." "Different good?" Emma asked, a touch of anxiety in her voice. "Different perfect," Sarah assured her. She watched a hawk circle overhead, remembering similar birds wheeling above her Montana mountains. But the ache of missing her old home had softened, transformed into appreciation for the wisdom James had left her, the strength to rebuild, to love again, to find joy in unexpected places. Michael appeared from the barn, carrying something, wrapped in oilcloth. As he approached, Sarah recognized the shape of a saddle, a small one, sized for a young rider. Emma's eyes went wide. "Papa, is that—" "Thought it was time Thunder had proper tack," Michael said, setting the saddle down. "Can't have my girls riding bareback forever." Emma launched herself at her father, nearly dislodging Grace in her excitement. Sarah caught the baby, laughing as she watched Michael spin his daughter around. Thank you, Emma gasped. "Can we try it now?" "Please, go on," Michael smiled. But be careful. Your sister's watching and she'll want to copy everything. You do before we know it." They watched Emma race to the paddock where her gentle Mustang grazed. Michael sat beside Sarah, taking Grace into his arms with practiced ease. The baby immediately grabbed for his shirt buttons, her favorite game. "Got a letter from Martha Weber," Sarah said. "The territorial courts have finished processing Hayes's seized assets. They're using them to compensate the families he wronged." Michael nodded. Emily wrote too. "She's taking the bar exam next spring. Plans to specialize in water rights law. Tom would be proud of her." "Yes." Michael touched Grace's cheek as she drifted towards sleep. "Just like James would be proud." "Of you, of this." Sarah leaned against his shoulder, watching Emma guide thunder through his paces. The girls' laughter carried across the yard, bright and free. "Sometimes I wonder what he'd think, seeing us here." "I think he'd be glad," Michael said quietly. "Glad you found happiness again. Glad his lessons helped you survive, helped you save others." He shifted Grace to one arm, his other hand finding Sarah's. "Glad you taught those same lessons to me, about standing your ground, about fighting for what's right, about family." In the distance, storm clouds gathered over the hills, but they held no menace now. Sarah had weathered harder storms and emerged stronger. She had a home again, a family built from loss and hope and choice, and she had love. Not just the treasured memory of her first love, but a new love, different but equally precious. Grace slept peacefully between them, one hand still clutching Michael's shirt. Emma's voice drifted back, calling them to watch her ride. The hawk circled once more and headed south, free and sure of its path. Sarah squeezed Michael's hand and rose to join Emma. The future stretched before them, as wide and promising as the Texas sky. 1 year later, the family portrait hung in pride of place above the ranch house fireplace, a testament to both the photographer's skill and the happiness captured in that moment. Sarah sat with Grace on her lap, the toddler's dark curls and bright smile echoing her father's. Michael stood behind them, one hand on Sarah's shoulder, while Emma perched on the arm of Sarah's chair, her pose both elegant and protective of her little sister. Sarah often found herself studying that image in quiet moments, seeing how their separate stories had woven together into something new and beautiful. Grace was walking now, tottering after Emma, with determined enthusiasm. The garden they'd planted bloomed with both Montana hardiness and Texas warmth, hearty sage beside delicate desert flowers, healing herbs from both territories sharing soil. James's pocket watch still kept time on Sarah's bedside table, though she no longer needed its ticking to fall asleep. Instead, she was lulled by the sound of Michael's steady breathing, Emma's occasional midnight wanderings to check on Grace, and the gentle Texas wind that sang so differently from Montana's fierce gusts. Letters arrived regularly from the north. Martha Weber reported that Hayes's conviction had sparked a cleanup of corruption throughout the territory. Emily Madison had passed her bar exam and already made a name for herself defending ranchers' water rights. The Henderson store flourished under new ownership, becoming a gathering place for honest commerce and community. Sarah's old homestead had found new purpose too. The territorial governor had transformed it into a way station for families traveling west, a place of shelter and fresh starts. Sometimes Sarah imagined James watching over those travelers, helping them find their way, just as he'd helped her find hers. On Grace's first birthday, they all rode out to their favorite spot overlooking the valley. Emma had packed a celebration basket, proud of her growing domestic skills. As they shared the meal, Michael surprised Sarah with a gift, a new journal, bound in soft leather. "For news stories," he said simply. Sarah opened it to find Emma's careful handwriting on the first page. "Family is love that grows." Below that, Grace had added her own contribution, a tiny handprint in ink, reaching for the future. Later that night, after the girls were asleep, Sarah and Michael sat on the porch where their new life had begun. The stars spread above them, like diamonds scattered on velvet, so clear you could almost hear them sing. "Any regrets?" Michael asked softly. Sarah touched her wedding ring. Then the older one she still wore on its chain. "Only that some people aren't here to see this," she replied. "But they are in their own way. In Grace's laugh, in Emma's strength, in the lessons we pass on. In love that grows," Michael quoted, smiling. "Yes," Sarah leaned against him, content. "In love that grows." A shooting star streaked across the Texas sky, bright as hope and swift as change. Sarah made no wish. She had everything she needed. Instead, she offered a quiet thank you to all who had brought her to this moment. To James for teaching her strength, to Michael for showing her second chances, to Emma for opening her heart, and to Grace for making them all whole. The night deepened toward dawn, carrying with it the promise of another day, another chance to choose love, to stand firm, to build something lasting from life's unexpected turns. Above the fireplace, the family portrait caught the starlight. Four souls bound together by choice and chance and courage, their story still unfolding beneath the endless Texas sky.